Okay, whenever you're ready.
All right. Good morning. Welcome to the Riverside San Bernardino chapter of the California Native Plant Society meeting. Glad you're tuning in or here physically. First, a little opening stuff for the people that are here locally. We have hot water pot over on the side and tea bags. Unfortunately, no coffee and a few refreshments. Please help yourself. People online, sorry. You probably have some at home though. A few announcements. Next month's meeting will be on April 18th, and I think it's a combined live and online presentation on lemon lilies and their very large pollinators, presented by Kate Kramer and Gordon Pratt. That should be very interesting. And then the following weekend is the Native Gardens Ramble city tours. And there's one garden in Redlands, and in the morning, Caroline Park has a native plant garden. And in the afternoon, there will be tours at Bonaminio Park in Riverside. So you should get flyers about that if you're a member, or it's on our chapter website. And that should be very interesting. So put that on your calendar. Then in May, the program will be an in-person program only, not online, on how to use Calscape and Calflora for finding plants for your yard, what's native in your area. Bring a computer or a laptop or a cell phone so that you can log into the online databases and learn how to use them. That will be presented by Arlie Montalvo, Betty Richards, and Erin Pickles. It should be a great program. June 20th, we're going to have our chapter board elections. If there's anyone out here who wishes to volunteer to be a board member for the chapter, there should be information on the website about that as well. And we're always looking for volunteers. Sign up and run, or you could be one of the appointed positions if you're interested in that. Unfortunately, I didn't bring the list of what positions we really need to fill, but that will come up at future meetings. All right. Today, our presentation is Plants of the San Jacinto Mountains, presented by Don Rideout. And I forgot to bring my information with your biography.
Oh,
so instead of me introducing, Lorraine is going to introduce him instead.
Well, I don't have your biography, but
Wait, but you know him.
Yeah. You could just make things up.
I can make things up. Yeah. Hello, I'm Lorraine Fuentes, and I'm really happy to introduce our speaker today, Don Rideout. This is actually the first time I've met Don in person, although became very familiar with him indirectly, and by that I mean Don goes on weekly botanical hikes with a companion, Tom Chester, and Tom is very good about writing up detailed accounts of their botanical walks and hikes. And these hikes are extreme, I think. They go from 5 to 7 miles or even more sometimes, and they last all day long. And they go to all sorts of interesting places. At any rate, when Tom writes up these botanical reports, he emails them out, and I get them once a week, and I really enjoy reading them. And this pair, has been to some amazing places, and they also hook up with other local botanists, depending on where they're going. Mostly they hike in the late summer through early spring in the San Diego County area, Anza Borrego, and environs. And then when it gets too hot and the plants burn up in that area, they're moving on to higher elevations in the San Jacinto Mountains. And I invited Don to talk about that today, and he was very happy to agree with me that would be a good talk to do. And I want to also mention that he is a great photographer, and they take dozens of photos on their hiking trips. and they post them on iNaturalist. They have, I don't know, what is your count? About several thousand anyway.
It's a little under 30,000.
Under 30,000, yeah, okay. Well, and it's just a delight to see these photos and hear about their trips. And they also have all sorts of interesting tidbits of information. And so this is how I've become familiar with Dawn and Tom. They're good friends. So I hope you enjoy this talk. I certainly will. Thank you very much. Dawn.
Get up with it.
Yeah,
Yeah. There we go.
Okay. Okay, so the San Jacinto Mountains. Technically speaking, it's the Santa Rosa and San Jacinto Mountains National Monument. The monument's boundaries enclose approximately 280,000 acres. So it's a big area. Oh, what did I just do? How do I get back to my starting screen? I think I touched.
Oh, good.
Boy, I'm sure glad you're here.
Okay.
We'll back up. Okay, hold on, folks. Whenever I do anything like this, there's always a technical glitch. Please do start it over. Okay, so I'll continue talking. So, as I mentioned, 280,000 acres. Of that, about 32,000 acres is designated as wilderness area. And it's jointly managed by the Bureau of Land Management and the Forest Service. And then there's an additional 14,000 acres in Mount San Jacinto State Park. So some really great open space areas for all of us. Now, as Lorraine mentioned, Tom Chester is my mentor. He is just a fabulous botanist, and I learned so much from him. So, as Lori mentioned, Tom and I hike in the San Jacintos in the summer when it's too hot to hike in the desert. And the San Jacintos are really ideal for this because you can get up to around 7,000 feet or higher, where it's significantly cooler than down in the lowlands. And of course, it takes some work to get there, but it's good exercise. So we get a lot out of it. If you want to get lots more details about the plants of this area, and I mean lots more details, go to Tom's website, which is shown here, tchester.org/plants. You will get lots more detail. Okay, the San Jacinto Mountains are true sky islands containing a large number of interesting and significant plant species. The San Jacintos are considered the northernmost of the peninsular ranges. The peninsular ranges going all the way down the Baja Peninsula down to the tip. And so it's a very long and very interesting mountain chain. Precipitation can be as much as 30 inches per year, and much of that up at the top is in the form of snow. But there's also important summer rainfall. And I'm not going to get into weather very much, but the summer rainfall is really key to a lot of the plants there. The highest elevations are up there where it discourages a lot of the weeds that plague the lower areas. But some parts of the mountains have been invaded by brome grass and bull thistle after fires. And I'm going to talk just a little bit more about recent fire. Most parts of the mountains are simply inaccessible because, at least to people, by virtue of very steep slopes. And you'll see that in some of the pictures, and maybe also if you've been up there, you know how steep it is in some spots. So all of these things contribute to making it a botanically fascinating place. Hiking in the San Jacintos is centered around the little town of Idlewild, where there are really many, many trails, including the Cedar Springs Trail, the Deer Springs Trail, Fuller Ridge Trail, Seven Pines Trail, South Ridge Trail, and the Devil's Slide Trail. I'm going to be talking mostly about the plants that one sees along the Devil's Slide. If you're thinking of hiking in the San Jacintos, there is great information about trail conditions available from John King's website. Are you familiar with John King? And so his website is sanjacjon, sanjacjon.com. And he hikes that whole area daily, which he's done for I don't know how many years, and has detailed trail conditions for every day. So you know when there are trees down, you know when there's snow on the trails, all that stuff. Okay, so this is a map of the Devil's Slide Trail area. It starts at Humber Park, which is just outside of Idlewild, and ends at Saddle Junction. I'm going to point to a few things here. So here's Humber Park, and here's Saddle Junction up there. So the Devil's Slide Trail goes up like this. And then when you get up there to Saddle Junction, well, the elevation gain from Humber Park to the saddle is about 1,500 feet over a distance of about 2.5 miles. And then when you get to Saddle Junction, you're in the Tahquitz Valley. And it is not perfectly level there, but it's more level. And there are 4 trails there that you can take depending on where you want to go and what you want to see. So, and I really got my foot there. Oh, I did something else again. Wait, maybe escape will get rid of. Oh, okay, good. All right, so the Pacific Crest Trail, PCT, runs like this. And so you can go north on it, south on it, or take one of these other trails that goes out that way. And there are a number of loops that one can make. Okay. Next. Some of the high spots in the area include San Jacinto Peak, which, well, that was on the previous map, which has a fire lookout tower on it. That's a popular destination. No, that's Tahquitz Peak. Sorry, San Jacinto Peak is the really high spot where it's over 10,000. Then Tahquitz Peak has the fire lookout tower. And then there's this knob in the photo here, which is called Lily Rock, which is very visible from Idlewild and very popular with rock climbers. I'm going to come back to that a little bit later. So now let's get into the plants. Let's start with the trees, in particular the conifers, which really dominate these mountains. Ponderosa pines tend to be at lower elevations on the Devil's Slide, with Jeffrey pines taking over as you go up. They are best identified by their cones, which I'm going to show you next. And then sugar pines, which is Pinus lambertiana, it's a little easier to distinguish. So Ponderosa and Jeffrey can be confused, but I'm going to show you the cones in a minute. But sugar pines are a little easier because they have these drooping cones that hang right off the ends of the branches. And the cones become very long compared with Ponderosa and Jeffrey. So based on the cones, you usually can tell sugar pines. And the sugar pines also produce copious amounts of sap, which sometimes coats the cones and drips down onto the ground. And aside from getting you all sticky, it can help you with identification. So here's the cones, Jeffrey on the left and Ponderosa on the right. So you can see that Jeffrey cones are usually much larger than Ponderosa cones. Now, they do separate out a little bit by elevation, but it's not perfect. So Jeffrey pines are found at the upper elevations on the Devil's Slide Trail, but they're also found in the Garner Valley, which is down lower, so that doesn't make a lot of sense. But the main thing is that no ponderosas are found above 6,800 feet. So if you get higher up, then it becomes Jeffreys and no ponderosas. I mean, there are other trees there too, but no ponderosas. Yeah,
I've heard people say gentle Jeffrey and prickly ponderosa. That dealing with the cones, right? The cones are prickly ponderosa, not on them.
just a second, did I? Yes, okay, so if that works for them, then that's great. But I've tried all kinds of different ways to try to tell them apart. And for instance, some people look at the bark and want to tell the difference that way. I can't tell any difference in the bark. Jeffreys also are said that the bark is said to be more fragrant. And it is fragrant, but I think that the ponderosa can also be fragrant sometimes. So none of these things are absolute. And then you've got to look at the pine needles, the number and length of pine needles. But the only thing that I found that really works for me is just the cone size. But you have to kind of check it out yourself and see what makes sense to you. Okay, and then we have these three other conifers here: Coulter's pine, white fir, and incense cedar. And all three of these look quite different from the other conifers, so there's usually no confusion there. Coulter's in particular has really huge cones, and the kind of cone that if it falls on your head, you're going to feel it. It's going to knock you unconscious. White fir has smaller cones that, as you can see, they're generally clustered up here on the very tippy top of the tree, and they very often stick straight up. And so that's distinctive. And also the white fir cones tend to not fall off. Instead, they tend to just fall apart right up there and drop the seeds on the ground. So most of the other pine cones, you'll find them all over the ground, but white fir is very rare to find one on the ground. They just sort of disintegrate up there. And then incense cedar doesn't have a cone that's quite like any of the others. And so the foliage is also quite different, so that it's usually easy to identify. And these trees are found at more of a broader range of elevation. So they're not restricted to certain areas. You find them all over. And then lastly, we have limber pine and lodgepole pine. Limber pine is Pinus flexilis, and lodgepole is, gee, I didn't write that down. What is lodgepole? Who remembers what lodgepole is? And I can't remember. Anyway, both of these are found only at the highest elevations on rocky ridge tops and peaks. You can see that the cones, again, are pretty different. The limber pine cones tend to stick straight out horizontally like that. And that appears to facilitate feeding by Clark's nutcracker birds, which get up there and pick the seeds out of the cones. And so they have worked out a deal there where that works for both of them. And then the Clark's nutcrackers, then they, aside from the seeds that they eat immediately, they store these among the rocks in places where the snow does not accumulate, so that they can find them later. If they planted them in the snow, they'd probably never find them again. So they plant them in the rocks in the places that don't have snow on them, so they can recognize that spot and find them again later. But of course, they never find all of them. And so that results in limber pines tending to grow in those kinds of locations. And then lodgepole pine has really the smallest cones of all of these, as you can see there in that photo. Then we have a bunch of oaks. Well, a few very nice oaks up in that area. There's the black oak, Quercus halogii. That's a big tree that most everybody can recognize. It's deciduous. It contributes a lot of fall color to the mountains, and it has very large acorns that are said to be the best for eating. I haven't tried them, but that's what I've heard. Then there's the canyon live oak, which is in the center there, Quercus chrysolepis. It is also a big tree, but it's evergreen, and it also has big acorns. It's sometimes called golden oak because of this color on the underside of the leaves. However, this can be a little bit deceptive. because the leaves are only this color on brand new leaves when they first come out. And over time, that color fades as the leaf ages. But even when on older leaves, when it has faded and it's not this color anymore, it's more of a dull brown gray kind of color, but it still has a matte finish to it. So it can be distinguished from interior live oak on the far right there, Quercus whistlizini, which we call whizliz just for ease of discussion. So whizliz is more of a shrub-sized tree, and it's most easily distinguished by the underside of the leaf being shiny. So if you're hiking up there and just turn over leaves, if it's evergreen and matte on one side, it's most likely Quercus chrysolepis. And if it's shiny on the underside, it's going to be whizliz. There are some really enormous old trees up in that area, the areas that have not burned in quite a while. And so this is a chrysolepis. It looks like it might be 2 or 3 trees that fuse themselves together into one enormous tree. So there's some really impressive specimens up there. Then we have a hybrid, oracle oak. It's a hybrid between black oak and interior live oak or whizliz. These are very different species in overall appearance, but they're in the same group of oaks. So they're genetically compatible, and that enables them to hybridize. Oracle oak is identifiable in general because it is usually a smaller tree and the leaves are different, as you can see here in this photo on the right. There's the black oak leaf, the big, deeply lobed one, and then the oracle oak leaf, which has a little bit of a suggestion of the black oak parentage, but it's not as deeply lobed, and it is evergreen. So the oracle oak does not shed its leaves the same way that black oak does. So one way to find them, if you want to find oracle oaks, is to go up there in the fall and hike around, and this is when the black oaks would be all yellow and orange, and look for ones that are bright green. And those, then look at the leaves closely, and those are likely to be oracle oaks. Then we have a number of really great shrubs. The most common one that you would see up there is pink-backed manzanita, Arctostaphylos pringli drupacia, which is really a mouthful. It has beautiful pink flowers in the spring, and then these beautiful bright red fruit. The only thing about the fruit is that they're very sticky, and Tom Chester calls them disgustingly sticky, which I kind of agree with, but they're not meant for us to be handling them anyway. So just keep that in mind. That's just an identification aid. Then a smaller shrub that's up there is the mountain whitethorn. And it's not my favorite species of ceanothus. There are others that I like better, but it's one that's very common up there. And it especially comes in after fires, and it just covers everything. It covers whatever acreage it can claim. So the photo on the left shows the situation shortly after the 2013 mountain fire. In that fire, over 27,000 acres burned, and a huge number of trees were killed. And after that, the Forest Service prohibited entry to the burned area for 5 years. And so that allowed the mountain whitethorn to really take over, as it typically does. And it completely covered up some trails, and those trails have not really fully reopened. And some of them, the Forest Service has said they've closed them permanently. And it has completely changed the look of the area, at least for now. But of course, there is a transition over time, and so the seedling trees start coming back, and eventually the mountain whitethorn goes away and waits till the next fire. The thing about the whitethorn that makes it not my favorite ceanothus is that it has these nasty spines that make it virtually impossible to hike through. I mean, you would have to have knee-high leather gaiters to be able to walk through there without injury. So that's the situation for most of our shrubs. That was a very short summary of the shrubs. There's a lot more shrubs than that, but I want to get into some of the weirder little things now, the things that are parasitic or quasi-parasitic. This is white-veined wintergreen. It's in the heath family, so it's related to manzanitas and blueberries, which it doesn't resemble in just about any way. It has a close relationship with the mycorrhizae in the soil, and it appears to need the mycorrhizae for survival, but it's not actually parasitic. It also appears to be a very early bloomer. There's one iNaturalist observation right now of it putting up an inflorescence in January 24th of this year. So that would be a time when normally the ground would be totally covered with snow, and but this year it was not. So this year may be just an aberration. But in any case, we've rarely seen it with flowers. But fortunately, the leaves are pretty recognizable with these very pale veins. But it is really small, so as you're walking along looking for it, you gotta keep your eyes open and look for little leafy things underneath all the pine needles. Chew on the leaves? I don't think so. The name wintergreen, I think, of course, that's a common name. So the origin of common names is I'm skeptical about some of those, but apparently it refers to the fact that it's one of the first things to come up in the spring, and it may actually come up through the snow. There are a number of plants that can do this, and so maybe that's where the name came from, but no relationship to the chewing gum, as far as I know. I wouldn't advocate chewing on it. And then we have this spotted coral root, Corallorhiza maculata, which is in the orchid family. And if you check out those flowers, you can see the resemblance to orchids, other orchids. It is truly parasitic. It conducts no photosynthesis, and that's why it doesn't have any green on it. It parasitizes below ground fungi that's found where there's a thick layer of forest duff, like pine needles and so on, which there are tons and tons of up there, but not every place supports spotted coral root. The good thing about that one, as far as being able to find it, is that it stands up pretty tall, although this one happens to be crooked. But usually they stand up pretty tall, up to a foot or so, and so it makes it a little easier to spot them. If you do spot one, then check out the buds or flowers. They're very, very interesting. And then we have another parasite, ground cone, in the Orobanchaceae family. Who has seen this one? Nobody's seen it? This is a really oddball one. It really does look like a pine cone that's laying on the ground, except when it's flowering. So this photo on the right, those are flowers in there. So it's a real flowering plant, but it's parasitic on the roots of manzanitas. So again, it has no chlorophyll, and it's just living off nearby manzanitas. This one it's way more common in far northern California in the Siskiyous, with just a few known locations in the San Jacintos. And it blooms in May and June and can be seen at a couple of spots right along the Devil's Slide Trail. So if you want to know where this one is, and it's not a rare plant because there's so much of it up in Northern California. So if you look at iNaturalist, you can find the locations of these and find them right along the trail. Now, the thing is, they're not always going to be there. They're not always going to look good. Sometimes there's just going to be the old ones still there on the ground, and it's just going to look like an old pine cone laying on the ground. So again, keep a sharp eye out, and you may see them. Then we have a number of springs and seeps along the trail that have very interesting flowers in them. So first we have the monkey flowers. The monkey flowers, at least for me, can be terribly confusing. So I'm just going to show you the three that I think I understand. So on the left is, and these are in the genus Erythranthe. So on the left we have Erythranthe tylingii. In the middle is Erythranthe moscata, and then Erythranthe cardinalis. So tylingii is a much larger flower and it has bilateral symmetry. So it's not perfectly symmetrical. It's just symmetrical from one side to the other. But the moscata, first of all, it's a much smaller flower, much smaller plant overall, and it has radial symmetry. You can see they both have some small reddish dots in the center of the flower that are nectar guides for the pollinators. And those are just very fun plants to see in some of the springs. And then Erythranthe cardinalis is, of course, red in color, so that's pretty easy to identify. And again, these really brighten up the springs up there along the Devil's Slide Trail. Then in those kinds of areas, you'll also find California geranium. And you can see that it has pretty distinctive geranium-like flowers and leaves, and forms larger, more raggedy, no, not raggedy, I shouldn't say that. But it's not brambly either, but larger, I guess, viney type bushes spread out over a larger area, whereas the monkey flowers tend to be small and compact and kind of stay in one place. But the geranium will creep all around and get into among other plants that are there, and then just pop out a few flowers like you can see here. One that you really can't miss when you go up there is the broadleaf lupin, Lupinus latifolius parryi. This is a big plant with big leaves. The leaves can be as big as a person's hand, and big flower stalks. Really great plant to see up there in those wet spots. And another one that you can't miss, and this one is again in the Ericaceae or heath family, so it's related to manzanitas, although it just doesn't look like it. But Western azalea, the flowers are large and fragrant, and the fragrance can sometimes be detected from quite a distance away, even before you can see the plants. So you might be hiking along the trail and just suddenly pick up the smell of Western azalea and start looking around, and it'll be in the nearest wet spot. When you get up to the top of Devil's Slide, you're in the Tahquitz Valley. And one of the features of the valley is several large meadows that are full of bracken fern, Pteridium aquilinum pubescens. And one feature, well, it's reportedly the largest bracken population in Southern California. There are several of these, several big meadows full of bracken. And this photo shows just a small portion of the population. And there are other things in there too besides bracken, but the bracken really dominates. But one of the things that you will find mixed in there in the wetter spots in the meadows are abundant corn lilies, also known as skunk cabbage. And the largest meadow up there is called Skunk Cabbage Meadow. This, I think, is a really unappreciated, underappreciated plant with really nice flowers. It displays massed seeding in which it doesn't flower in most years, but then all of them will bloom in 1 year. That last occurred in 2024. That was when I got these pictures of the flowers. Another interesting little tidbit about it is it said to be highly poisonous. So Carl, don't try eating things. No matter, yeah, don't chew on any part of it, although it might look tempting, but don't do it. Yes, that's right. Yeah, if you've been on both coasts, you've seen, and I suppose they're related. I'm not sure how closely they are, but that comment was about the East Coast lily that resembles this one. And there are tons of other plants in the meadows. Tom Chester lists 162 species in his flora of the meadows of Tahquitz Valley. I have only seen a handful of those. Okay, now we go to one of the stars of the show, the lemon lily, Lilium parryi. These beautiful flowers really speak for themselves. In the San Jacintos, they're found at higher elevations, primarily in the creeks and wet meadows, especially those areas protected from gophers. Gophers are a big problem for lemon lilies. Tom Chester has been surveying lemon lilies here since 2009. He's made annual repeat counts, observed individual plants, some of which he has named, counted numbers of flowers per plant. He's observed the effects of gophers, fire, flooding, and erosion. And in the early years, Dave Stiff was Tom's survey partner. Does anybody know Dave Stiff? Okay. Dave was Tom's survey partner. Dave started a lemon lily festival in Idlewild, but he has since moved to Arizona, and I'm not sure what's the status of the festival now. But the fact sheet, which is at this address, that I'm not going to read it off there, but that's a lemon lily fact sheet. And so that fact sheet was co-authored by Tom and Dave. Okay. So now this is an example of Tom's highly scientific approach to studying lemon lilies. This is looking at the density of lilies versus mileage. Please do not ask me to explain it because I can't. Please don't ask me any questions about it. I'm just showing you as an example of how he looks at these things. And I have to mention the impact of past bulb collecting. This is going back, 100 years or more. But in the early 20th century, tens of thousands of bulbs were collected by people. Some people collected them to sell them. Some people collected them just to try to grow them at home. I doubt that very many of them, if any, survived at all. And Harvey Monroe Hall, who was one of the very earliest botanists in this area, in the San Jacintos, he wrote that he observed more than 5,000 being collected in a single season. And this went on for quite a while until collecting was finally banned. So this is the typical habitat of the lemon lily. And as I said, gophers love to eat the bulbs, but they apparently don't like to go through carex or carex roots. So the prime locations for lemon lilies are in these creek beds that are choked with sedges. The key locations for this are in the Tahquitz Valley, are Skunk Cabbage Meadow, Willow Creek, and Candies Creek. The best time to survey for them is, of course, when they're blooming. In the photo there on the left, the big photo, there is a flower. Can you see it? Let me see if I can do this without tripping. Right there. So that's what you have to look for when you're looking for, I just lost my notes screen. I don't know where it went.
I just pulled it up again. Book.
Like that? Oh, okay. Yeah, that worked.
Yes.
Great. Yes. Okay. Okay, so a non-flowering plant like the one on the right is, of course, much more difficult to spot, and baby plants are really difficult to spot because they're hidden in all that other foliage. This is what the fruit looks like with the seeds inside. It's a pretty standard 3-chambered fruit. It produces maybe 150 or more seeds per fruit. So seed production, assuming it gets pollinated, seed production is good. So here are a few more facts about lemon lilies from Tom and Dave's fact sheet. There are 2 disjunct populations. There's one in Southern California, which is in the San Gabriel Mountains, the San Bernardino Mountains, San Jacinto, Santa Rosa Mountains, and Palomar Mountain. And then there's another population in southeastern Arizona, in the Santa Rita, Huachuca, and Chiricahua Mountains, and in nearby Mexico in the extreme northern Sonora in the Sierra Los Ojos. All of these are at elevations between 4,500 and 9,500 feet, so they are in Sky Island type habitats. Despite all that collecting in the early 20th century, the San Jacintos still have the largest population. The population there is about 4,000 plants. Now, if you consider that in the past, 5,000 were taken out in 1 year, it's pretty amazing that there are still 4,000 left. And then there are a few left in the Huachuca Mountains. There are about 2,000 in the San Bernardino Mountains, about 1,300 in the San Gabriel Mountains, and then fewer than 100 plants in each of the other locations. The primary pollinator appears to be the sphinx moth, but that needs a lot more study, which I understand that Gordon Pratt is going to be doing. And he's going to be talking to you about that. So that's all I'm going to say about it, and I'm going to leave the rest to him. But here's a map showing those two disjunct populations that are about 500 miles apart. Very interesting. Disjunct populations are always fascinating. Here are a few more lily facts. The typical lifespan of a bulb is 10 to 20 years. The plant is not self-sterile, so it has to have a pollinator, whatever that pollinator is. And it doesn't do any form of vegetative reproduction. Some bulbs do vegetative reproduction where they produce offsets or bulblets. The lemon lily appears to not do that. So it's got to regenerate from seed, and it has to have a pollinator to do that. And it has a fairly short-lived seed bank. The seeds may only survive in the soil or in the creek, wherever they fall, for 1 to 5 years, something like that. So they've got to keep this up year after year. A healthy population should consist of about 50% young plants. That is, plants with either just one flower or no flowers. But the population by that measure appears to be declining, because in the counts that Tom has made in recent years, over the last 15 years, it appears that the young plants are not being found, let's put it that way. And so this is the photo on the left here, shows a bunch of young plants. They're not first-year plants, but they are younger plants that have not bloomed yet. So that's what it should look like. But that appears to be happening less and less, which is a problem. This photo here shows a plant that has been lightly browsed by deer. And first I should go through the list here. The threats to lemon lilies, gophers and deer, then the past collecting of bulbs, past cattle grazing. The cattle grazing there used to really result in a lot of damage to the meadows. And that caused increased runoff, which tended to incise the creek banks so that they became too deep. They couldn't support the population of carex that they needed to protect the lilies, and they either washed the lilies out or buried them in sediment. And then there was past logging, which did the same thing. And then there were past and current fires, which caused accelerated erosion. And of course, drought. So all of these things are lining up to be pretty big threats to lemon lilies. So the deer browsing is not going to kill the plant. It may prevent it from blooming in one particular year, but the bulb is going to survive. But other threats are potentially going to be fatal to the bulb. In particular, the mountain fire of 2013, which I mentioned earlier, it did a great deal of damage to the lily population, not just from the immediate effects of the fire, but from the later effects of erosion and sedimentation, because with the slopes denuded, the water ran off much more quickly and just scoured a lot of the creeks. In some cases, it washed away the carex, and that gave the gophers access to any remaining bulbs. And then, as I mentioned before, there is the lack of young plants. In the past, Tom noted that fruit set was near 100%, but that's no longer the case. The plants are flowering and some are getting pollinated, but for reasons that are unknown, the proportion of plants producing fruit is down just since 2020. Okay, so that is the lemon lilies. Now I want to move on to some other rare and interesting and unusual plants of the San Jacintos. There are 11 endemic taxa in the San Jacintos, and I'm not going to talk about all of these. The 4 that I'm going to talk about tend to be diminutive and found at higher elevations, growing in quite steep granite cliffs in almost inaccessible locations. And they also have a tendency to be isolated, pocket populations, even though there are thousands of acres of potentially suitable habitat surrounding them. And I have to admit that these are my favorites, the four I'm going to talk about. So the first is San Jacinto Mountains Kekiela rothrockii, subspecies hasintensis. The rothrockii part of the name honors Joseph Tremble Rothrock, who collected the first specimen of the species. Kekielas are related to penstemons in the Plantagenaceae family, and the first specimen of subspecies hasintensis was collected by Davidson in 1876. It has a CNPS ranking of 1B3 now, and the vast majority of the population is located in a very small portion of the mountains. It's only about 5 square miles. And it is a medium-sized shrub with numerous small flowers, very nice, delicate-looking little flowers, kind of typical penstemon-looking flowers. And it is seen along a lot of the trail, so it's often easy to observe them. So this is probably the largest and least cryptic of the endemics. Next, we have one that's seen much less often, shaggy-haired alum root, Euchera hirsutissima, in the Saxifragiae family. That's hard to say. Species in the Euchera genus are difficult to separate by the usual methods, such as looking at the flowers, looking at the leaves, and so on. Tom Chester has a web page where he analyzes the minute differences between them, and he concludes that hirsutissima and some others are best defined by geography, in particular the higher elevation mountain species, which have isolated populations. This one is found only in crevices and granite boulders above 7,000 feet in the San Jacintos. And despite the fact that there are literally millions of these kinds of granite crevices and granite boulders all throughout the mountains, but the plants are found in very few of them. The population appears to be, at least in my view, appears to be stable at this time. One easy place to see it is on the trail to the fire lookout at Tahquitz Peak. And here is a map that Tom Chester produced showing these high elevation isolated species. So the one on the far left center there is hirsutissima, and then these other little bulbs there show other species of Euchera that are equally isolated and equally rare. Pardon me? Oh, seeps. Not necessarily seeps. They grow in just a crack in the rock. And you know, these granite boulders have a tendency to produce lots and lots of cracks and crevices. And they're not necessarily wet spots. It's just a crevice, and you know why they will appear in one and not another is a mystery. And I'll show you a little more of that phenomenon with the next species, which is Tahquitz mousetail, Ivsia callida. This one is in the rose family, Rosaceae. It was first collected and described by Hall, that was the Harvey Monroe Hall, in 1901. And it's known from only 2 locations in the San Jacinto Mountains of Riverside County, including Tahquitz Peak. One location is about 5 acres in size, and the other is about 20. It was presumed extinct at one time. It had a rare plant rank of 1A when the first version of the rare plant inventory was published in 1974. At that time, it had not been observed since 1921. So it was found in described in 1901, and then not seen again after 1921. But this is partly due to the fact that the location was not well described by Hall or others that had seen it. It's actually just a bit off the South Ridge Trail. That's the trail that goes up to Tahquitz Peak and the fire lookout. And that's used by very many people. And it was rediscovered in 1980 by a botanist named Ken Berg, who then did an article about it in the April 1983 edition of Fremontia. If anybody has that, you can get it online. Berg expressed surprise that so many people, including himself, had passed right by it for years, and yet no one had found the plant in 59 years. But he found it again and then was able to reacquaint everybody with it. It now has a CNPS rank of 1B. The population appears to me to be stable and thriving with several thousand individuals. And here is what one of those crevices in the rock looks like. It doesn't, as far as the rock goes, it doesn't look like anything special, but certain ones of these crevices are just perfect for the plant, and you'll get a whole string of them like that. Very amazing. And the flowers are just gorgeous. If I go back to when it's flowering, they're just great. So that's one that if you can get up the South Ridge Trail, that's a good one to see. And here's the next one of these obscure ones, the San Jacinto prickly phlox, Linanthus yeageri. This is another one that loves high elevation and dangerously steep granite cliffs. Once again, Hall found it in only 2 places. Since then, a few other locations have been found. It's in the Polemoniaceae family and has a ranking of 1B.2 on the CNPS inventory. I wish I had more to tell you about this one, but there's very little information about it that I could find. There are currently 77 observations of it on iNaturalist. 8 of those are mine and 15 are Tom Chester's. So not a whole lot of people are seeing this. All of these are narrow endemics, and not just the Linanthus, but all of these endemics, because they're narrow endemics and because they're on the CNPS list, they have their locations obscured on iNaturalist. So you can't go to iNaturalist and find out where these are. However, the locations of Linanthus yeageri are fairly easy to find near trails if you know what to look for. So it just involves a bit of looking among the boulders. Specifically, look up. And so in this photo on the left, there's Linanthus yeageri way up there. If you can get up to it, then you can get a photo of the flower. So, and this particular plant right here is pretty much right next to the Devil's Slide Trail. So if you know where to look, you can find it. Okay, now for the grand finale. This one is not endemic, and it's not at all rare in California, but it's still a pretty big deal. The discovery of California mountain ash in the San Jacintos is one of the more exciting stories, exciting to me anyway, in recent years. On August 10th, 2025, a hiker named Angela Patty was hiking with a group, not on the Devil's Slide Trail, which is bad enough, but on a very steep, difficult trail used by rock climbers to get to the base of Lily Rock so they can start climbing the rock. She actually went off trail a bit and spotted a shrub with bright red berries, and she thought that was interesting. So she took a couple of photos and posted them on iNaturalist. So these 3 photos there are hers. And here's her original iNaturalist post. On iNaturalist, she uses the name Golden Silence. So this observation set off a flurry of comments. An observer named Kyle Bryan made the first comment. He said, "It's not Toyon because the leaves are compound, but beyond that, I'm puzzled. It looks like a sorbus, but it's growing much further south than sorbus are known to grow. I'm curious to hear what other people say." So other people chimed in with a number of other guesses: pyracantha, Brazilian pepper, and red elderberry. Angela responded by saying, "Just chiming in here to confirm that it's not in someone's yard. We were well off trail at the mapped location when I took this." And she added, "It's further up the mountain past where the Lily Rock Climbers Trail peters out. I don't know if I could find my way there again." So, you know, this was an obscure location. If it's off of the Lily Rock Climbers Trail, nobody goes there. So this was a location that possibly no one had been to before. Other commenters on her iNat post were Tom Chester, Scott White, Bob Allen, Keir Morse, and Justin Wood. And all of them were commenting back and forth, trying to figure out what this could be. It turned out that Kyle Bryan's initial guess about sorbus was right, but further photos and a specimen would be needed to be certain. So when she said it's further up the mountain, past where the Lily Rock Climbers Trail peters out, this is what she was talking about, as seen from the Double Slide Trail. Her plant is somewhere in the middle of this shot. I just cannot imagine how she got there. I really wanted to see this plant, but Angela's comments made me a little nervous. Seemed to indicate that it would be really difficult to get to. And Tom Chester was not up for it, but my friend Ted Karagosian was interested. So we decided to try getting there from the ridge above the plants, going down to it instead of following Angela's route. So I thought it might be easier that way. No, we hiked a couple of hours to get to this spot, where we then went up the right side of this rocky knob. And this alone would be it was tricky. It would be considered a class 4 slope where we had to use both hands to hold on. But we did it because the GPS told us we were directly above the plant, only about 900 feet away. However, when we got to the top, this is what it looked like. And so I felt like ropes would be needed to do it safely, and we didn't have any ropes, and I chickened out. But Ted is a real mountain goat. So he went down, found a plant, took a bunch of photos, and then Ted doesn't use iNaturalist at all. So he just sent his photos to me, and I posted them, giving him credit. So here's my post of Ted's photos. And from these photos, Scott White then was convinced that it was Sorvis californicus. I should mention here that Scott is co-author of the Western Riverside County Checklist, along with Fred Roberts, Dave Bramlett, Steve Boyd, and Andy Sanders, a real gallery of experts. And he is currently working on revising the checklist and preparing a new flora of the San Jacinto and Santa Rosa Mountains. So he got really excited about this find. And by the way, he will be leading a hike up the Cedar Spring Trail for Southern California botanists on June 6th, if anybody wants to get in on that. So this is a really significant range extension for the species. The next closest location is in Sequoia National Park, over 200 miles north. Why is this plant here? It's most likely a relic from who knows how long ago. The reason it's still here is that it's on the north-facing slope in a gully that retains snow a lot longer than other places. So it's kind of mimicking the conditions of the Sierras. But this may have not this particular plant, but this species may have been here for thousands of years. We don't really know, but it's an amazing thing to find. On September 14th of last year, 2025, Angela went back along with Justin Wood. Angela made 5 more observations on iNaturalist, and Justin made 1. In addition to the original plant, they found about 10 more, and they collected specimens, which they delivered to Scott White. And so here is Justin Wood's photo showing the kind of the whole population right there. Clearly, this is not just a single waif plant, and it's not struggling to survive. It is a legitimate population, and it appears to be thriving. These are a couple of Scott White's photos of the prepared specimens, which I believe are going into the UCR herbarium. And so I want to close with a couple of scenic shots of other places to check out. This shot is Wellman Cienega, a really beautiful spot with views of the Coachella Valley, all kinds of things growing in this cienega. Cienega is basically a wet meadow. And then this is looking toward the tram station from the Hidden Lake area. So this is the easy way to get up there. If you want to start from Palm Springs, take the tram up to the top, and then you can hike all around that area. That's the end of the adventure and the end of my slides. And so now I'd be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dawn. I really appreciate it. Just checking. This is Katie, and I'll be handling the questions online. And maybe if we can start with those, although right now I don't have any questions. So if folks do have questions, you could please put those in the Q&A. Jenny or Lorraine, maybe if there's questions in the room, you could go ahead.
Okay, Jack has a question.
Are most of your pictures direct from the trail, or are you off trail a lot, or?
Okay, the question was, are most of my pictures direct from the trail or off trail? And they're mostly from the trail or off just a little bit. But we don't like to go off trail too much because it's dangerous there. It's very steep. And, we don't want to be stepping all over plants to get to something. So mostly you're taken from right on the trail or adjacent to it. Yes.
You had a couple of websites in the first few pictures. and
Yes.
I didn't get a chance to.
Okay.
picture.
Okay, the websites. Let's see if I can get back to those. I should be able to.
Dawn,
Yes,
I'm sorry, could you just please repeat the question for the benefit of the folks online, please?
that's right.
Thank
Yeah,
you so much.
this was about the websites that were noted at the beginning. So I'm going to go back to try to get those for you. So tchester.org/plants. He has a very encyclopedic sort of website, so you will find all kinds of things on there. Oh, was it John King's? Yeah, San Jack John, SanJacjon.com. So that's for trail conditions in the San Jacintos. Were there any others there? I think, yeah, okay. I think that covered, yes.
You mentioned June 6th, how do you sign up for that?
Okay, the hike June 6th is Southern California Botanists, led by Scott White. So go to Southern California Botanists website, and that will have the information. I should have repeated the question first. The question was about the hike on June 6th that I mentioned. So again, Southern California Botanists, go to that website and you can sign up there. Other questions?
Well, the things I put there, first I see there are a lot of kind of possible.
Okay, yeah, so the question was, because a lot of climbers go up there to climb Lily Rock, is it possible that the seeds could have hitchhiked on climbers? And it is possible that could have happened. We don't really know how they got there. But because it's such a big, healthy population, it doesn't appear to be just a fluke, or a wave, which would be more likely the case if it was just a single plant, let's say. So to me, it seems more likely that it's been there for quite a while. A lower boundary. Well, okay, I'm going to make a wild speculation here. Wild. And that would be that it goes back to the end of the last ice age. So approximately 20,000 years. I can imagine, now don't take any of this as gospel, but in my imagination, this area probably used to be covered with mountain laurel back in those times when the snow level was much lower and maybe there were glaciers on the San Jacintos or quasi glaciers. And so this is kind of a remnant population from that period of time. That's just a wild guess on my part, because it's really equally plausible that seeds were brought there by climbers who had been in the Sierras. Genetic testing? Okay, so the question was, are they going to do any genetic testing? And I'm not sure. This would be a question for Scott White, because if anything like that was going to be done, it would be him or in conjunction with UCR. So it would be really interesting to find out. Any other questions? Yes.
Conifers in Central and Northern California, there's been
big increase in insect infestation to the trees, causing a lot of damage. We noticed that in the San Jacinto.
Okay, the question was about insect damage to trees, which has been occurring in other parts of California. And that is happening in the San Jacintos also. And it's sort of a side effect of drought. When the trees get drought stressed and they can't produce as much sap, they can't prevent the boring insects, especially, from getting in there. And so it's affected the white firs quite a bit. And there are lots and lots of dead white firs up there. But there's also new growth. There's seedlings coming up all the time. So it appears, just casually looking at it, appears that they are, the replacement rate is keeping up with the loss for now. Of course, if drought continues or worsens, then that could change. And it could start to affect other trees too. Other questions? Yeah.
Yes, I noticed from reading the botanical reports that go out every week, that you often, and it's not just to the San Jacintos, but all your hikes, that you often have an objective. You're looking for a certain species or a certain plant. Who comes up with those ideas
Yeah.
do you actually meet your objectives most of the time?
Okay, so the question was, we typically have a botanical objective, a particular plant that we're looking for on these hikes. And where does that come from? Who comes up with that? And the answer is Tom comes up with that. Tom knows he has seen all these plants many times. And so he has particular ones that he wants to check on. He wants to either see, are they flowering or are they in fruit? Are they still there? For instance, one plant that I didn't mention on the Devil's Slide Trail is Philadelphus. And mock orange, I think, is the common name. And so we will, when we're going up the Devil's Slide, we will often stop there and go off trail a little bit to find the Philadelphus and see if it's flowering or not. And so he will have objectives like that. And we almost always achieve the objective, but sometimes we don't. Sometimes the plant is just gone, or in some cases, if we're talking about annuals, sometimes the plant just never came up. There wasn't enough rain, so it just didn't come up. But usually we do find what we're looking for.
And I noticed you go off, you take little side trails off your objective, and find all kinds of interesting things. I know
Yes.
you do also chronicle a lot of insects and birds.
Yes.
And
Now,
so it's not just plants, it's, the whole flora and fauna that
right.
you see on your trips.
Right. I try to record the birds and insects and reptiles that we see. And so on the Devil's Slide Trail, we've seen mountain king snakes, which is really fun to see, and a variety of insects, butterflies, other insects, and birds when I can get them to slow down. But they're very uncooperative. They just don't give a darn what I want them to do. But yeah, I try to capture more than just the plants. I'm interested in the whole assortment. Any other questions?
Don, there are some more questions from online.
Yes.
Excuse me, I'll just read those out to you. The first one is, could you talk about the needles on the pines that you showed? You talked about the cones, but there was a question about the needles.
I can't really answer that because I don't have notes with me on that, and I can't remember.
Yeah.
So that's something that can be looked up in the Jepson manual or other sources like that. You can look up how many needles and the needle length and so on. And I'm sure Tom Chester's website also has all of that information. But offhand, I can't really say much more about the needles.
Yeah, that's a good point though. It's easy to find, and somebody's noting Rod, who lives up in Idlewild, is noting the numbers on some of the common pines. So thanks for that. Great. Next question is from Denise Mitchell. She said, great talk. Thank you. She takes students out to the James Reserve and is looking to widen out. She said, I can't get to Devil's Slide until June. Would I be able to still see blooms or will it be too late?
Okay, and when these questions, can everybody hear those? Okay. Okay, so yeah, I would say June is really the start of when it's starting to get good on the Devil's Slide. Now, some things may already be done, like the wintergreen. It may be done by June. I wouldn't be surprised at that, but a lot of other things will just be getting going. And so definitely June, July, those are good months to be hiking on the Devil's Slide.
Great. The next question is from Eric von Prague. He said, Don, great presentation. Is there a nice brief PDF guide with pictures of the flora of the San Bernardino and our San Jacintos that hikers can download to their phones and use for reference during a hike?
I don't know of one like that. Does anybody else here know of a quickie guide to the plants of the San Jacintos? Yeah, I don't know of one.
I think you could search on iNaturalist, you could filter.
Oh, right, that would
the
be a good way to
areas
do it, yeah.
For plants.
Yeah, that would be probably the best way to do it, is to look on iNaturalist and do filter by area, and you can filter by time. Like if you want to see things that were observed since January 1st of this year, you can do that. Or you can look in a number of other ways. So that's probably the best way to do it. I'm just not aware of a ready-made one.
Great. I don't have any more questions online. Lots of great comments. Very wonderful presentation, Don. And we sure appreciate that you and Tom and others are out looking at the flora and keeping track of everything and telling us the best place to see things. So thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your joy in the plants of the San Jacintos.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be here. Okay, I think we're done. Thank you. Yes, Lori.